edition of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career Outreach Coordinator at the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at KU.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career Outreach Coordinator for the William Allen White School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Today we are joined by KU alum Kevin Harlan, a two-time National Sports Broadcaster of the Year, who's just 9 days ago was calling the Chiefs Super Bowl for Westwood One. Welcome, Kevin.
Stephen, great to be on with you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
And speaking of Chiefs, there's still a buzz around the area about the Chiefs. I know you were play-by-play for them from 85 to 93, and if I'm math correct, weren't you doing play-by-play in 93, the last time they were in the AFC Championship before they had the run of 5 straight?
I was indeed, yes. That was Joe Montana's first season with the Chiefs. Marcus Allen was with the Chiefs. And I left after that season, after 9 years, and went to Fox Sports and joined their NFL broadcast team. But had a chance to be a part of the literal bottoming out of the Chiefs all the way to a chance to get to the Super Bowl. But they lost in Buffalo to the Bills. But Joe Montana was there, and that was fun to be on that final Chiefs broadcast with him.
And I saw an interesting note. I believe the recent broadcast was your 13th consecutive one calling the Super Bowl, correct?
It is, yes. I've been blessed in so many ways, and that certainly is one of them. I love the NFL. I grew up in an NFL family. My dad was in the NFL for 37 years and was the CEO and president of the Green Bay Packers. So grew up in press boxes and on football fields, and so football's in my blood, and the NFL in particular. And to do those 13 in a row has been one of the wonderful blessings of my career.
And I know you've had a lot of famous calls. The ones that I remember pretty recently, I think it was 2019, when you were calling 2 games at the same time there at the very end. I think it was what, the Chiefs, Chargers, and then the other one was what, the Patriots, Dolphins. What do you remember about that?
29 seconds left. Here, Butker kicks the extra point. And Fitzpatrick throws in the end zone. Touchdown, Miami! The Dolphins have just scored. Gesicki.
Do you get much feedback on that one?
Well, I do, yes, especially from Kansas City fans. And actually, I saw Ryan Fitzpatrick at a party at the Super Bowl last week in Phoenix. He tapped me on the shoulder, and I've known Ryan for many years, but that's the first thing he brought up. He was quarterbacking the Dolphins that day in Foxborough. And to reacquaint our viewers, that was a game where the Chiefs, if they won at home against the Los Angeles Chargers, and if the Patriots lost at home to Miami, the Chiefs would get a bye that first weekend. And that's what happened. The Chiefs beat the Chargers, and Ryan Fitzpatrick threw a late game touchdown pass to beat the New England Patriots in Foxborough on a frigid day. And we knew that game was very important to our viewers. So they had set up a monitor in the bottom of our rack of screens that we see that was on the floor, actually. So our game was going on and their game was going on. And throughout the game, we'd say, all right, the Patriots have gone up 10-3 or 17, whatever it was. And it got late in the game. And here are the Chiefs driving to take a lead. And here are the Dolphins driving late in Foxborough. And it was like they were in step with each other. The Chiefs would have a play. That game would have a play. The Chiefs would have a play. That game would have a play. So the timing was perfect. And people were in the stands watching the Chiefs broadcast and listening to us. Rich Gannon, who I was with that day on CBS. And as it turned out, the Chiefs scored. Then Fitzpatrick threw the touchdown pass. The Chiefs got the extra point. The Patriots were going to lose that game, and the Chiefs are going to win this game. And so it worked out really well and was a nice moment. And our director that day, an LSU Tiger named Mark Grant, who now does the Final Four for CBS as the director, he had captured the crowd perfectly in sync with all these other things that were just working in lockstep. So it was really fun.
And before you started calling the Chiefs, you were calling NBA basketball for the Kansas City Kings right before they moved to Sacramento. How did that come about? Because that happened about right after you graduated from KU, correct?
It was the day I graduated. I walked down Mount Aurea the day I got my diploma from the William Allen White School of Journalism. And I went back to my room at the fraternity I was in. And on the voice machine, there was a voicemail from someone with the Kansas City Kings, now the Sacramento Kings, and saying that I was their number one choice. The regular voice had moved on to do the Philadelphia 76ers. there was an opening. I had worked at this station through college when I was at KU and would drive into Kansas City and work for KCMO Radio. And they wanted to see if I had any interest and would I come in that next week and visit with them, which I did and got the job. And so I was 21 doing my first NBA broadcast, and that was my first job out of college.
So when you got to KU, I think I read somewhere where your dad connected with Gary Bender. He made a recommendation about KU. So did your dad say, son, you're going to KU, or did you take a visit, or how did that come about?
Well, I was going to go to Notre Dame. I went to an all-boys Catholic school in Green Bay, and our high school radio station had a 10-watt student-run radio station that was supervised by priests and nuns. And we used to do all of our games. We used to do our football games and our basketball games at the high school. And my dad, with the Packers, was in Chicago playing. They were playing the Bears. Gary Bender was doing the game at that time for CBS. And my dad was telling him, hey, yeah, my son's in broadcasting and is looking at Wisconsin, and Notre Dame seems to be his first choice. And Gary had said, well, he needs to see this guy at KU who took me under his wing and gave me all the practical experience I could possibly want when I was getting my degree. And the guy's name was Tom Hedrick, who at the time was doing the radio play-by-play for the Jayhawks on football and basketball on the KU Sports Network. David James was his the All-American quarterback. The Jayhawk All-American quarterback was his color partner. And I called Tom after he'd done the Cotton Bowl for CBS Radio and said, I'd like to come down and visit. And he said, come on down. So I fly down to Lawrence and had lunch with Tom. Went to the game that night with Tom. They played Colorado. Darnell Valentine was the freshman guard for the Jayhawks at Allen Fieldhouse. And that was when the media was off the floor about 10 rows up in a wonderful view of the court. Now, of course, they're on the court, but on the other side. But this particular vantage point was up in the stands, and sat next to him as he called this game, watched him tape the Ted Owens show. I flew back home to Green Bay on Sunday night and said, I'm going to Kansas. I said, Mr. Hedrick had promised me a chance to be his second. I could fill in on radio sportscast at KANU. I could work at KJHK as a student. I could work at KLWN and KLZR in Lawrence. And he said I could also be on the KU Sports Network doing pregame, halftime, and postgame.
Wow.
It was an offer that I could not refuse. That was more than I could have dreamt. And sure enough, I got there as a freshman. I was on the sideline for the statewide broadcast. I was doing halftime interviews. I was on the postgame show. And everything he promised me came true. And it led to many other things too. But Tom Hedrick is about as instrumental as anybody. And Tom, of course, taught a class at KU, sports broadcasting, and I took that class. So I owe so much to Tom and what he did for my career.
And rumor has it that you were the first person to get an A in that class. Is that true?
Well, I don't know about that. I know some of the other students, as I later found out, kind of complained, and I may have gotten an A from Tom, and they I don't know if they liked it that very much, but it's safe to say that I wouldn't be where I'm at right now without Tom Hedrick. And what was so great, Stephen, about being there, just how life is so funny. You never know what's around every corner and up every street. But when I did my first Super Bowl for Westwood One and CBS Radio, and then I also did Super Bowl 50. Like I said, I've done the 13 in a row. But when I did Super Bowl 50, in the 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl, it went back to when Tom Hedrick broadcast the first Super Bowl for CBS Radio with a guy named Jack Drees back at the Los Angeles Coliseum between the Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers in Super Bowl I. And who would have ever thought that guy who broadcasted Super Bowl I would go on to teach and have a student that would broadcast Super Bowl 50. But that was the nice relationship and the fun story that those two Super Bowls represented. So it's never lost on me that Tom broadcast the first, and I broadcast the 50th, and this past year broadcast the 57th Super Bowl.
What do you think when you had that first meeting with Tom? What do you think you provided that caught his attention? Was it the voice, the delivery, that work ethic? I mean, what do you think impressed Tom right away?
I'm not sure. Probably, I think he was a little bit taken maybe by someone who was so serious at such a young age and was so dedicated to the craft. And he probably thought, I'm looking to maybe lessen my load. I've got so much going on. I've got talk shows and sportscasts and all these different things, coaches shows, all these things I've got to do. And I could really use an assistant, and for whatever reason hadn't found anyone. And I came along, and I was covering practices and getting interviews for him and his radio shows. I was filling in for him when he was running late with the coach. It was helping him on the broadcast. Would drive to all the Big 8 games in football and many in basketball, and did that for 4 years. So I really did. I got to fill in and had a plethora of opportunities to do things over the air, and that really was the number one reason why I chose Kansas. Is right off the bat. And at the time, Kansas was a top 20 broadcast journalism school. Syracuse was okay, but not with the reputation it has right now. SC, Georgia, Northwestern, all good schools. But Kansas was in that group from a broadcast standpoint at the time. So I got the great education at that great journalism school. Loved the campus. It was going away from home, which I thought I needed to do, from Green Bay to Lawrence, and then had a chance to get on the air as a freshman. And that was just something I could not turn down. And as it turned out, I had all this experience. I always tell kids when I talk to them now in college, and I get many requests to visit with classes or students, I would say everything you can do in college, it's like dog years. It's like 1 year of doing a lot of stuff in college is worth 5 or 7 years when you're out in the real world, because you're getting your education and you're learning the business at the same time. When you're out of school, you're in the business and you're fending for yourself, and there's really not much of a safety net. When you're still in school, you have the chance to get your education and build on that and maybe discover another path you could go. But once you're out and school is over and you're in the real world workforce, it becomes very difficult. And so by getting those 4 years of extensive on-the-air work with Tom, and then getting an internship at WIBW after my freshman year, which was immeasurable in how it helped me with TV and radio. And a freshman getting that was a blessing in so many ways, and just had not happened before. That led to me getting the job out of college the day I literally graduated from KU. So going to KU, and with that education, having that diploma, and working for Tom with all the practical experience. And listen, he had offered this to other kids too, but for whatever reason, it didn't work in their schedule, or they had a conflict. I always said, I'll be there, I'll do it. And I did. And it proved to be a pretty good formula.
So when you arrived to KU from Wisconsin, I mean, sounds like you had a plan in place. I mean, you were wanting to move as quickly as you could and start calling college and pros. I mean, you knew exactly what you wanted to do.
Yes, and I worked there that freshman year and did all the things I just talked about. Went into interview at WIBW in Topeka, which at the time, I still contend this, at that time, that was in 1979, the summer of 19, I was a freshman in 78, so 79, after my freshman year, they had offered, and they still might, and I don't know, but they offered an internship, I think maybe 2 in news and 1 or 2 in sports, probably 1 in marketing and 1 in advertising with WIBW in Topeka, on-air work, like you would do newscasts on the weekends. Kids at KU or K-State or wherever they were interviewing from would be put on the air, given a chance to edit tape and be the anchor on the news. I went for the sports internship and got it. And then that led to 3 more years, my sophomore, junior, and senior year, doing games on radio on Friday nights, high school games. And then all of that led to my internship and eventual job at KCMO Radio in Kansas City, producing the Chiefs pregame show for the Chiefs radio network. So truly one thing led to another. And I got out in 4 years. I probably should begin with that. A lot of people think, oh, you went 5 years. I graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism in 4 years. I was able to keep up with both. Now, I was busy. It didn't have much of a social life, but with absolutely not one single regret, because it was the most fulfilling college experience anyone could have possibly wanted.
And I'm from Topeka, so probably when you interned with WIBW, you're probably with Ron Paradis?
I was with Ron Paradis. Steve Fiziak was also there. He's about 3 or 4 years older than I was, but he had just been hired from a little station in Hastings, Nebraska. And I was hired by George Logan. Do you remember that person? George Logan. That's who I interviewed with. I drove in on a Saturday, like in April, an interview with George Logan. And I walked in, and there were a room of about 25 or 30 kids. And I later found out they're mostly rising seniors in college or going on to graduate school and needed practical experience on their resume. And I went in there, and George had said, this is not going to be a popular decision that we're hiring a freshman, that we're going to hire a freshman for this internship. But by the grace of God, it all worked out. And I know by going to that William Allen White School of Journalism, that was a huge push in my favor. And it worked out wonderfully. And I worked there then the remainder of college. I'd go in on Saturday nights and do a sportscast in the fall after doing the KU game that day at the stadium, Memorial Field, then drive into Kansas City and produce the Chiefs pregame show, stay up all night long, slept on the floor at KCMO Radio, cutting tape and organizing the show, and then a 3-hour show that next day on the Chiefs radio network. So those were busy fall weekends for me without much breathing space, but certainly all I remember is how much fun it was and how lucky I was to be in that position.
In 40 years into your career, how have you been able to kind of maintain that high energy? Because it seems like you treat every game like it's the game of the week or a Super Bowl. I mean, how have you been able to maintain that?
Well, I love the job of broadcasting. I love the business of broadcasting. It's not for everybody, and it's and I have been blessed far more than I should in that regard. That I've been lucky to have a job and then literally hold on to it as long as I have chosen. And so to be at one place, I've been at CBS now going on 25 years, and at Turner Broadcasting going on 26 years. Was with the Chiefs for 9, and left that job to go to Fox, and I was there 4 years until the CBS opportunity came along. So there has to be a zest for it and a real passion. My dad always said that every day that he woke up and his feet hit the ground getting out of bed, that he could not wait to get to work. And if I ever would find a job like that, it would make it not a job, but a passion and more like a hobby and something I wanted to do. And as I tell kids, I said, if you can find whatever it is you want to do, whether it is marketing or advertising or writing and or editing or whatever, in the many spokes that are the world of journalism, if you can wake up and look forward to your job, you'll work harder at it because you enjoyed so much, and then there'll be a degree of success that follows. But the most important thing is you'll enjoy everything along the way. And that's kind of how it has been for me. It is. I've loved the job of broadcasting. I love sports, and that combination, I think, makes for a lot of passion on the air. I'm a fan. I love sports. I'm a fan first, and like I said, grew up in it. So all that makes a big difference. The worst part now was something I was looking forward to when I first started. That's the travel. I used to look so forward to road trips and going to different cities I hadn't been to. But then I met my wife right out of college, and that changed in a hurry. And now I did not want to leave. And then we had our 4 kids, and now we've got 4 grandkids. And so now it's a torture chamber to leave every time that I have to. But it is part of the job, and she's used to it, and the kids are used to it. But we kind of live with that as the one kind of downside of what I do. By the way, during COVID, we used to broadcast a lot from our basement for the various sports, and it was great. I'd do the game, and then 10 minutes later, I'd be going to sleep up in my own bed. I never have to leave my house. But those days are over, unfortunately. And so now there is the travel back into it. And like I said, that's kind of the only downside of my job.
Probably a lot of it's muscle memory now, but how do you make that switch between radio and TV? I mean, I assume early on, always heard the stories between radio and broadcasting where broadcasting, and you don't have to say every little detail. I mean, how do you have to really train yourself to say, okay, I'm doing radio today, I'm not TV, and vice versa?
Well, I was so lucky that I kind of came up maybe in the last broadcast generation, however that wants to be classified, where radio was still pretty prominent and important. And so that led me to delivery and voice development. And I continue to say that is the number one thing that college kids should work on right off the bat is their delivery and their voice and their presentation. Our daughter is in broadcasting, was with the ESPN for many years. And she went, unfortunately, to the University of Georgia. I couldn't talk her into being a Jayhawk. She went to Georgia. But the one thing I told her was, as she was a sideline reporter, is I'll take an A delivery with a C story over getting a C delivery with a great story. And so she has kind of gone down that path, works on it every day, as I do when I listen back to my tapes and grade myself on each broadcast. But the great thing about radio is I think it is the purest form of broadcasting. It is delivery, it is reporting skills, it is word usage, it is exuding the passion that needs to be with a big play. It's about pace and cadence. It's all these things that make such a difference. And then when you get on TV, quite frankly, you work so hard on radio to do all those things. Think off the top of your head, have the voice, not talk too fast, make sure you have the reporting things lined up and in perfect order. On TV, you've got so much help. You've got graphics and you've got replays and you've got, number one, the picture, which speaks for itself. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, you don't have to say very much. You can accent it, accentuate what you see, but the play-by-play guy in television is number 4. It's the picture, then probably the analyst, then the replays and the graphics and all the fun things we see on TV, and then the play-by-play guy. On radio, you're number 1. Your words are painting that picture. And I love that challenge. I love the challenge of painting the picture with the right delivery and the right cadence and the right words and exuding the right emotion when it's called on. So I think radio helps me with TV and probably TV helps me with radio. And it's a nice marriage. But I love radio, grew up wanting to be in radio, never thought about TV. TV just kind of happened along the way, but radio was my first love.
And you mentioned your daughter, Olivia, in broadcasting, and I think it was a year ago, you were the first father-daughter combo to call a game. I think she was on the sideline. You were in the booth. What was that experience like? And again, I think it goes back to a Chiefs game.
It was, Stephen. It was wonderful. We did a couple playoff games at Arrowhead. We did a game up at Lambeau Field in Green Bay. And the funny thing is, you know, she's kind of wanted to get in this business for a long time. I would take her to the press box and she'd sit in the back of the booth as we did games. She would visit with my wife, Ann, and our other kids when she was too small to be up there by herself. But she knew all the things that were going on, and she kind of caught the bug. And I told her, I said, Liv, it's hard. This is a hard business. And all you've seen in your years has been the very top of the business, a network job, no moving, no losing jobs, by the knock on wood. And you've only seen the best part that this job has to offer. But the reality is most people, as they work their way through this business, have to live in multiple cities and lose a job here and there and don't make it to the network. I mean, the network number is a very small number when you think of the thousands that are all over the country doing TV or radio. So I said, you've only seen the best of it. And she said, that's okay. I'm ready to go. And I told my wife, Ann, I said, we'll know soon enough if she has the work ethic, because you need that more than anything else. And especially in college, when there's so many things that can tempt you not to work, going to a party, being with friends, doing whatever. And when she was at school, she was clearly destined to be in the business and loves the challenge of getting better. And I'm very, very proud of her. And doing those games with her nationally, we're the first father-daughter national broadcast in an NFL game. And it was one of the high marks of my life for sure.
And Kevin, do you still have time to prepare I can't remember what the official name for it is, like your pregame board with the starters, the stats, the notes, the streaks? Do you have time to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right here, I'm working on my Kentucky broadcast for this week. Kentucky plays Auburn, and there's Auburn, and there's Kentucky, and I'm going to fill those in here when we get off. I've got I'm doing the Philadelphia 76ers this Thursday against Memphis, and I've got those boards in my briefcase down below me here. I wouldn't go out on a limb and say preparing for the games is the best part of it, because there are so many different things that you need to look at and be on top of. You don't want to miss anything. And it kind of grates on you literally. So the time they throw the ball up and they tip off a game, you literally working every second until the game starts, and then you say, what I've got is what I've got. The best part is just doing the game, and I love the mechanics of the game and following the game and being a good reporter during the game, which I tell students again. I said, if everybody is writing about the game that you're broadcasting as it unfolds live, be the best reporter you can be. All the notes are great. You need to refer to some things, you need to be on top of some different milestones that may occur or some trends that have happened. But at the end of the day, you're going to be graded not on how many anecdotes you have. You're going to be graded on how you reported that game, how you broadcast that game. So that becomes, the longer I'm in the business, the more I have developed that sense of being a great reporter during the broadcast. That goes back to reading John Bremner's Words on Words or whatever. I think that was the name of the book that he produced. I've got a copy right in back of me here, and I've kept that. Yeah, Bremner was the best teacher I ever had at KU. He was the hardest teacher in the J school that I had. That experience, but I loved every second because he demanded so much and was a colorful character, and you know who I'm talking about clearly. So he was a wonderful teacher, and I think about often what he said, just little things that may come up. Like I would say, oh, and by the way, so and so goes. He would say, it's not by the way. If it was by the way, it should be in your lead. It shouldn't just be, like little things like that just for whatever reason you stick in my head. So learning to be a writer was a good thing for me to do to become a broadcaster. To be a solid broadcaster, you need to know how to write because you're constantly doing opens and closes and leading into some kind of a feature, whatever it might be. And so writing continues to be at the forefront of what I do.
And I think we're a month away from Sweet 16 week of March Madness. I assume you're going to be part of that coverage.
Sure will. Yep, I've done the tournament every year since '80. Let's see. Now I did '86. I did 1 year for KU, Larry Brown's first year, when Tom and I were broadcasting the Jayhawks. That's the only year I broadcast KU after I graduated. Did 3 years at the University of Missouri. And I don't say it very loud, especially on this podcast. But I did 3 years at Missouri for Norm Stewart, and then I've done began in '99 with CBS. So this will be another year doing the tournament. Last year I had the great privilege of doing the Jayhawks in Chicago when they won the Sweet 16, won the Elite Eight on the way to capturing a national title the next weekend. So that was a lot of fun. Got to see Bill and all the people that I've come to really appreciate and admire from afar.
And do you know your assignment for the tournament already, or when do you find that out?
No, we'll find out Selection Sunday. They'll call us about 10 o'clock on Sunday night after they've figured out the games and what games are going to be broadcast where and what network is going to carry those games. And we could be on any one of the 4 networks that are there, but we know that the viewership is huge. A lot of people stream. That has added a whole nother dimension to our broadcast and what we need to do. And that's kind of fun that people, even in offices or if they're driving and can't, watch the game, can have it on at least in the background or for the car, for the other passengers. So there's a lot of fun things out there, and we can't wait for the start of it.
Going back to another one of your famous calls, with no regard for human life. Did you think that player at that time would become the all-time leading NBA scorer?
Mid screen, Posey will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life.
He was off to a pretty good start. Ironically enough, I did his very first NBA game with Cleveland when he was 17 or 18 years old, and it was in Sacramento, California. And I did that first broadcast for TNT then. And I knew that clearly he was going to be a star, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had set the bar so high, Steve, that I don't think anybody thought it could ever be approached. And sure enough, LeBron has averaged 25 points a year for 21 years. So he's had the longevity and the health and the success to pull it off. I don't know if this NBA player today has the wherewithal and the stamina to go that long and put up those kind of numbers. This truly could be a record that LeBron, when he is finished playing, may never see broken. It's going to be well over 40,000. And that's almost, to me, it seems impossible that it would ever happen. It could, but when LeBron finishes playing, it'll probably be an unattainable mark.
And one more question before I go. A student reached out to me. How do you recommend students create like their audio and video reel? And what do you think is the most important part to like a reel for a student?
Well, when I listen, this is just personal preference. I want to hear at the very beginning of the reel, either audio or visual. Maybe some really great highlights to know what he sounds or what she sounds like when the big moment arrives and how they handle it. And then I want to hear about 2 to 3 minutes of that student and how they sound just calling a series of plays or back and forth in basketball or an inning of baseball without anything spectacular, but just how they sound, 95% of the time. And I can listen about 30 seconds on an audio tape and pretty much get it and know, what the student who has to do it. I've listened to so many and have so many sent to me that I can tell in about 30 seconds, where that student kind of currently is, where they may be able to go. Watch a little bit more of the TV because you're dealing with a few more elements, like I said, the picture and the graphics and dealing with the analyst and the voice. So you're listening to all these things kind of at once. But I've done it so many times now. I've kind of thought that maybe when I retire, I'm going to have a service, and that's all I'm going to do is just listen to kids and watch kids' tapes and give them whatever pointers I can. Sometimes those tips are in short supply, and I think students, some of them at least, are craving for feedback, and they want honest feedback. And I try to be as honest as I can. And if I hear a student that doesn't have the delivery, I said, you got to work on your delivery. And then I'll give them a couple of examples, which is something that I had to learn on my own. But I give them a couple of voices that I think are really good voices that would be ones to try to aim at. And you want to condition your voice and your presentation, because that's a lot of muscle memory and inflection and getting air in the lungs. I mean, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but there's a lot involved with all those things. And then how you present yourself on the air and how relaxed you are and just all, those things. And I may do that as a little service, but the one thing people don't do in our business is practice. In every other thing in life, they practice. Opera singers practice. Golfers practice. Quarterbacks practice. Everybody practices in basically what they do, except people in broadcasting. They just go on the air, and then what kind of happens. So I've got a whole set of things and ways that they can practice closing the bathroom door, being in the kind of an echo chamber, reading out loud, taping yourself, comparing it to others, voices that I think you should try to at least condition yourself to sound like, and then you'll take the off ramp and become what you're going to become. But you need a roadmap. And I think that's the biggest thing for kids is that they don't know sometimes, what roadmap to choose and what exit to take. And I think the longer you're in the business, because I'm continually working at it myself, I'm never said it. Just listen to my Super Bowl broadcast the other day, flying home from the All-Star game. And I've got a chart and a strategic sheet that I use to grade what I do. And I listen to it two ways. I grade it with the ingredients that are in the broadcast, and I grade it on my personal delivery and performance. And I could pick 1,000 things I wish I would have said differently on every game that I do. But I feel like if there's that constant self-appraisal, that I'll eventually continue to improve. Now, it won't be like the leaps and bounds that younger kids do, but it may be just enough that I'll kind of check that box and I'll be able to move on. But it takes constant listening, and it's a constant challenge. I like the challenge. I think that if you're in this business, you've got to accept that challenge.
No, great advice, Kevin. Hey, again, I appreciate you taking the time to visit. I know you've got an extremely busy schedule. And I want to say, hey, cheers to your careers. I think it's been, 40 years to your career. Hey, cheers. Hey, safe travels this week. Thanks, Kevin.